this frame rail used to look like this. And this frame rail is sitting over here, but needs to be over here. And this is our donor car that donated this frame rail to fix that frame rail. And this is the other frame rail that we get to cut off to replace onto that, so we can finally get the car straight, maybe, and we can make it so that we can finally put this car back together. Last video we replaced this. That's in the right spot. We replaced that. That, I'm pretty sure is in the right spot. Oh, I just realized I made a huge mistake, but now we can fix it. Let's fix it. But we won't know until we replace that one. So now, in this video, we get to replace this one. First thing we have to do is take this piece off from there so we can see what's behind here. And I think on this railing over here, I'm thinking I'm just gonna actually make a cut, but I'm not sure if that's gonna work. First things first, let's remove that. By using a tiny drill bit, it helps guide the spot weld remover tool so that it doesn't slip and create a big hole. Then I could use this body chisel to hammer it and break all the spot welds. Once all the spot welds were removed from the top, then I had to move to the underside, which there is this brace that I had to use a band filer to file down some thick welds and even more spot welds. And yes, there is a lot of spot welds holding this thing on. Okay, so now that we got this part removed, it does let us see a lot that's going on here, and it's gonna help us make the cut line. Now, I'm gonna try to figure out how I'm gonna remove that without removing everything, if that makes any sense, but because this is. Otherwise, the other idea was to cut this. So I'm gonna start by trying to remove some of this stuff and see what happens. I started removing a lot of that electrical out of the way, and even tried to remove this ABS pump, but the ABS pump was in there and it was just gonna be a lot of work. So instead I moved to the underside and started drilling out. There's this little bracket that's underneath that holds that tray on. Then from there I could use this die grinder to remove the metal that was in the way of where I needed to make the cut on the frame rail. Now with that metal out of the way, I knew exactly where the damage was, so I could start making the measurements on the good frame using a laser, because we want to make sure that we get a nice pristine cut, and then did the exact same thing on the bad frame. Okay, so now is the moment of truth. I have this all taped up, and I'm pretty sure I got it in the right spot and it's ready to be cut. So I'm gonna be making a cut here, and then back here, I'll show you because it's probably gonna be easier to see on this one. So I'm actually gonna make a stagger of these cuts. So I'm gonna make a cut up here and then here. This will get rid of all the damage on this side, and this will get rid of all the damage on this side. Not only that, it gives me some good reference points. It's 2 inches in between here and this and this and these. And I should be able to line it up so we don't make any mistakes. Wish me luck. Final cut. Well, second to last final cut. Cut this out. Using my Dremel tool, I cut the frame horn welds. By removing the frame horn, it makes it easier to get in there so that you can get your cutting tools on the perfect angle to get a nice clean cut. Okay, one frame rail is off, and trust me, this does not get easier, even though if I did it on the other side, it's still pretty nerve-wracking doing it. I'm hoping that it's straight. So, before I do that, I'm gonna check this frame rail, make sure that this one is lining up with this one, and then make a cut. And hopefully it's right. Okay, so I'm pretty sure that I got the measurements right. I checked it 3-4 times. Now, I did notice, if you see, the measurement from here to here is correct, but right here, I did go on a little bit of an angle. So I'll probably have to shave some of that down. Now, to be 100% sure, I'm also gonna take, and I'm gonna slightly cut just a little bit larger than this line. and if I have to, I can shave it down. That way we don't make any mistakes because we want it to be correct. So here goes nothing. Let's cut this off. Now, using my cutoff wheel and my Dremel tool and a lot of patience, I slowly started cutting the metal, making sure that I get a nice straight cut because there is no turning back once I make this final cut. Ha! It's out! Just, dude! Okay, so I did get this one kind of lightly mocked in here. It is not tacked in or anything, but that frame rail is actually off. So I'm gonna have to cut the welds and refigure that out. Like I said, this is all a learning process. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just learning. You guys are learning along with me. So be sure to hit that thumbs up button because yeah, let's get to cutting, redoing this. We're gonna make this right. We got this. We got this. We got, woo! That scared me. We got this. I cut off the frame horn and I cut off the frame rail that I welded in the last video and tried to realign them back up, which still seemed to not line up perfectly. So I started doing some investigation. Okay, so I know I keep saying it, but I think I actually got this figured out exactly why that frame rail is not lining up. That line right there is off. And if you go over here, if you see, it looks like that moved. So what has happened, and I'm 100% sure about this, and I'm not gonna weld this anymore or do anything because I'm pretty sure I can set this down, put some supports underneath here, and loosen up those bolts, and it should. It didn't shift a lot, it's just a little bit, and I believe that's holding it up. Using some jack stands, I supported the motor and then started loosening up all the subframe bolts. And then with the subframe bolts removed, I could use the porta power to start pushing the frame over, which the frame started to move, but then continued to bounce back and it just wouldn't push over far enough. At this point, I'm willing to try anything to figure out why this thing is not lining up. But first thing we're gonna do, we're gonna try to relieve some tension because there definitely is some tension, and that is a good possibility when you're buying crash cars. Here I started removing the sway bar because I thought maybe that this sway bar was bent and it was pushing on the frame rail. And when I did remove the sway bar, it did bounce back a little bit. From there, I used the laser and the porta power to make sure it was lined up because I did have some good reference points on where it was supposed to be at. And this is where I discovered the big oopsie accidental mistake that I made, but don't learn if you don't try. Oh, I just realized I made a huge mistake, but now we can fix it. Let's fix it. I think that we figured out exactly what is wrong with the frame rail, and the fact that is I welded it in wrong. Like I said before, I'm not a professional, and actually I downloaded the Bentley workshop guides, and they actually want you to cut it so it's like this, offset. I didn't do that. I thought I could cut it straight. So the plan is actually we're gonna cut off another piece of this frame rail, cut that out, and then use that to make a new frame rail for this with the measurement. So let's get to cutting off that. And hopefully this is right. If not, I'm gonna have to buy another frame rail and do it all over. But for now, we're gonna try this. So on the parts Bentley, I started cutting out a section of frame rail that I remeasured using stagger cuts to make sure that I do not make the same exact mistake as what I did before. And using this frame rail is just so that we could use a reference point so that we can make sure that the frame's bent and know where it's bent at, which you'll see here soon. And that way it will help us line everything up and hopefully get everything back together. At least that this will give us reference points to know where and how it's bent and how to correct the mistake while we wait for the next frame rail so I don't make the same mistake again. And even with this new chunk of frame rail, trying to line everything up, for some reason it still didn't seem to be right. It still didn't seem like that the frame horn or anything wanted to line up. Now I'm gonna take off this wheel, and behind there's a lot of grime and gunk and just nastiness. I'm gonna clean that off and see if I can just find anything that is a bent. I mean, come on, man. We gotta figure this out. I'm so confident. This is exhausting. I'm trying to figure it out, but I know we can do it. So take this wheel off, clean out the inside, look around. There's also like this little plate that's in there, and I'll show you when I get there. That I think that I might be able to look behind there, but come on, dude. You guys got faith in me? Hit that like button. Come on, baby, let's do this. By jacking up the car and removing the wheel, it would expose the whole frame rail, letting us see more. And then I used a degreaser to kind of clean off all the dirt and grime, and this is where I started to notice something that could be a possibility. I did notice that right in here, that there is a small slight gap, so I'm assuming we might be able to see something right there. So I'm gonna take that off, I'm gonna clean that all up and look. I mean, like I said, I'm trying everything here to figure this out, but I'm assuming this might be the issue area right in here. Using this piece of metal, I was able to stick it back there and figure out exactly how big that the gap was and where it was separated from the frame. Then from there, I used a tape measure to see how far back and where the gap started. And then taking those two measurements, I drew out on a piece of paper a triangle with that gap so that I could figure out the space and see how long and how much of an angle, because I could not find any other bend on the frame rail, but knowing that it could be a slight bend, this was a good way to try to figure out and solve the issue of the frame, to know if the frame might be bent on a long angle. And I even checked the measurements twice to make sure, and this is a good reference point. This would give me a good idea of a possibility on where that the Bentley is bent at. Okay, so I think I got this thing figured out finally, and I'm hoping, and this time I'm pretty sure I got it right. Let me show you. Now if you see here, this right here, there is a gap. And if you've seen in the sped up video, yeah, there's definitely a gap right here. Now there is a little gap right here, but nothing really right here. So that tells me that right here is where this bend starts and it folds. And I think what it did is it kind of pushed all this, because this isn't lining up, so it needs to come back this way. Then this should line up, and then this will come over this way. So I think I'll have to drill spot weld, spot weld, spot weld, spot weld, spot weld, bend this, bring this back, and that should be good. Now, I'm not ready to do that just yet. Let me show you what I mean. So what I did is I built a triangle right here with different segments of where it intersects. Obviously, if this right here, I would be able to see it, but the farther and farther away it goes. So then I went over here and brought it over here. I took a piece of metal and I stuck it in there to see how that the gap thins down, made marks where that it got thinner and thinner, and then measured out to the front of this, because we know this is a jig, and then figured out the space on that. So now we know whereabouts that the bend is, and I'm pretty sure it's right there, because there is nothing from here forward that is obvious and nothing from here back. And I know because if I'm measuring down here at this point across the other point, which I have been doing, and there's a hole right back here on the back side, which I use a trim gauge, it lines up. It lines up perfectly. So that tells me that from here back, and I also measured from there to there, and so on and so on. So what I'm getting at is that the bend starts ever so slightly, like a quarter of an inch, but the longer it gets and the farther out, the more it goes over. So that quarter inch that it's off 17 inches back actually equates to being off a half an inch in the front. I'm pretty sure that is the issue. And I'm pretty sure that we'll be able to fix it. But I need to get that frame rail in. I need to cut it and fully weld it out. I should have never cut out the other one, but at the same time, that one wasn't right. So we can cut it. I'm gonna double check my math. I'm gonna do it again. And instead of boring you guys showing it, I'm gonna figure it out, see if I come up with the same thing. But I think that's where we're at. I think I got it figured out, finally. Super, super annoying, but hey, like I've said, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just having fun, and I'm learning. So, and hopefully you guys are learning too, because save you guys some time. I don't know at this point. I was just trying and having fun. So